Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host, Leanne Hughes.
Hey, I'm Leanne, and you're listening to episode number 3. Thanks for tuning in. So my aim is to bring you at least 20 episodes this year, and our first 3 guests have all been phenomenal female facilitators who lead soft skill workshops around leadership and diversity. So in the future, I'll be looking forward to hearing from the guys, and I'll also really drill down into specific skills that that give you a bit of an X factor, whether it's to up your flip chart game or just improve your voice. So that's something to look forward to. And if you subscribe to the podcast, you'll be the first to hear about it. But on to our next guest, and I really enjoyed this chat with Nikki McMurray from Corporate Learning Partners. I've personally learnt a lot from her, and you will too. I'd like to introduce you to our guest today. She has over 25 years experience in the adult education industry. And as a facilitator, she's terrific at really honing in and evaluating the dynamics of a group. She ensures that all of her sessions are hands-on and interactive, with a focus on connecting theory with practice. Her background extends consulting, training and coaching for industries for a company called Corporate Learning Partners. And she's worked in open and underground mining, rail, water, gas, manufacturing and government. Welcome to the podcast, Nikki McMurray.
Thanks, Leanne.
Nikki, 25 years is a long time to be working in education and learning and development. Have you ever had a career outside of that?
Yes, in the very early days I was in IT, and then I went into marketing, and I happened to get a job in the world of corporate adult education. Fell in love with it and haven't left it since.
So do you think some of the IT and marketing skills helped you where you are today?
I think absolutely. And, you know, even though you're in the industry of adult education, you're actually in everyone else's industry. It's not just, you know, adult education in its purest form like a university. You're in and out of different industries, and that's what makes it so interesting and exciting.
So how did you actually get into the world of facilitation and education?
I took on a job as a coordinator for P&O. And it was in their training and education area. And I also worked a fair bit with the Australian Institute of Management doing coordination. And I really enjoyed the vibe and the excitement and the enthusiasm in the fact that, you know, when you're partaking, you know, skills or knowledge, you know, there's a certain amount of, you know, excitement for the participants and sometimes even nervousness. So from there, I went to uni at night and then studied adult education. And I was actually not a facilitator for a very long time. I stayed in the administration and I worked my way up to being a state manager for a computer training firm that concentrated only on corporate. And about 13 years ago, I walked away from corporate and started my own business. And that was the first time that I've ever facilitated full time. So it was pretty scary and exciting.
Coming from an admin background and then managing sort of RTOs and client training in organisations, do you think that helped you when you became a facilitator?
Absolutely.
In what particular way?
I think because I focus primarily on leadership workshops, having been a manager for many years, I have a really good understanding of a lot of the issues and the challenges leaders face in the workplace. And most of those challenges don't vary from industry to industry. So I can relate. And I'm very empathetic and compassionate for all the leaders I work with now as a coach and a facilitator in the arena of leadership, because there probably isn't a challenge that they're having that I haven't had myself in real life. And did all the tripping and stumbling also.
And I guess it helps because you can talk the language when it comes to feeding back information to clients about what's going on in the training environment, and then I guess what they can do to continue on, building that person's ability after you've left.
I think that's what good adult ed's all about: sustainability, making sure that things are handed over in a manner that is easy for the individual to contextualise back in the workplace, for them to be able to go back and know, I can do this, or I can do it, and I might probably trip and stumble a little bit, but I was warned I was going to trip and stumble, but I want to do it bad enough that I'm motivated to push through. Yeah,
and that's really good insight into embedding all those learning strategies. Any other tips on doing that? Because I think it's something that organisations do struggle with. You can go on with an approach of, we're going to run this workshop and then we expect people to change instantly, but we know that's not the case.
No.
What do you recommend to clients?
The number one best way of getting a return on investment when it comes to adult education is ensuring before the individual goes to whatever the learning is, a meeting occurs between them and their one-up, and a discussion occurs about what are the objectives of the workshop and what do you personally need to get out of this. And then a follow-up meeting. That is the number one way of getting a return on investment, because participants walk into my learning environment with all different expectations, some purely for lunch. Let's get serious. Unfortunately, that is true. Day off work and I should get a really nice lunch here. Others come in with no real idea, but just happy to be there. I'm a new people leader and I just need anything you can give me. Others will come in, the ones that get the most out of it actually come in with very specific challenges, and that you can't remember everything from a 1 to even a 3-day workshop. You're only going to really remember what's relevant and what you need. So if you come in without anything really in mind, you'll probably walk out going, wow, that was really interesting and I met some nice people, but none of the tools will have really stuck for you because there was nothing in it in the first place, unless a challenge through the workshop comes to mind and then you start zeroing in on how I can fix that. But it's amazing how many people come into a workshop with really no understanding of even what we're going to be covering. And that one-on-one meeting with the boss before and after is gold.
Okay, so let's just say that you do have participants in the workshop and they've got no idea that you're there. You've expected, there's been some sort of conversation. How do you manage that then as a facilitator, trying to bring them in and lead them into this learning journey?
I think that through activities and discussions, you start getting an understanding of where they're at in their people leadership, like how much experience they've got, and their confidence level. And normally by their confidence level, you can probably guess the areas that they're probably going to find challenging. And it's not even on their radar because they're avoiding it.
So we talked a lot about the participants' pre-work, but I just want to talk about the preparation that you have before a workshop. And I know, in our work together, we'll have a workshop that starts at 10 o'clock in the morning and Nikki will show up at 7 o'clock in the morning to get the room ready. Is this sort of like a ritual that you've had over the course of your time in this environment that it's really important to prepare?
I like at least an hour and a half, and if I have more, I'll take as much as I can get. I think it's really important to be very familiar with your environment, with the technology that's available, and also the way in which you want the room set out. The way in which the room's set out, the music that you've got playing is all setting a tone for when they walk in the door. And that also includes your own preparation. I am a huge prepper. People that say to me all the time, I just wing it, that might work for them, but I would never, ever do that. I just can't. I do a lot of preparation, even if I'm running the same program over and over again. And the room and making sure that it's set up the way you need it to be to work the participants is just really important. You've got to be able to think ahead of the types of activities you're doing, the type of space that you've got available, and be able to utilise everything that you can the best way you can. And that might be walking in and rearranging the whole room that someone has so kindly set up for you, because, we thought there was going to be 16 participants and now we find out that there's going to be 12. It's nice that it's cosy and intimate if we have smaller numbers, but it's important that they're comfortable if there are larger numbers, and there's always enough space for everybody. With a lot of the organisations I work for, they're very male-dominated. Women, I find, don't find it too hard being a bit more squashed in, where the guys like a little bit more space.
And we also talking about the differences, I guess, between participants and what they want. You did mention earlier that some people are there just for the catering. And I find that really interesting. A lot of the feedback sheets we get back, the comments are really about, the catering. Is there like the best menu? What would it look like for a training environment?
It's like air conditioning. It'll never be perfect for everybody. And most organisations these days don't even do catering. Most people bring their own when it's in-house. So if the people are lucky enough to actually get the company having to provide the catering, normally it's a nice lunch because it's a free lunch.
Now, the only feedback I have about that is I made the mistake once of serving cakes and sweet food at morning tea and hot savoury items at afternoon tea, and I didn't really hear the end of it. So swap those two around. People love having hot food at morning tea. That's just my advice. Okay, so let's talk about energy. And a lot of the workshops, you run up to 5-day workshops, which is just unbelievable. I've never done anything like that. Even after one day, it can be pretty exhausting. How do you actually keep the energy and keep your participants really moving along over the course of 5 days?
The course design is really important in regards to energy levels. As you know, I like to have them up and moving around approximately every 20 minutes to 30 minutes because I think that most of the people I work with don't actually sit at desks full time. So sitting down they actually like it, but they're not used to it and they find it really hard to stay focused. Where if you have them moving around or doing activities or even just standing, it can make a huge, huge difference to the energy levels. So one, it's the way in which the workshop's developed. But for me personally, I'm pretty passionate about what I do. So I think it's important to shut the outside world off. Everyone has things going on outside the learning environment, and I think it's really important as a facilitator that we're able to just shut down, turn our mobile phones off ourselves as well as the participants, and create that environment that's going to be best for them to get something out of the program. So I am naturally pretty high energy.
I agree with that. Yeah.
I do know a lot of people that are extreme introverts that do what I do, and they really work themselves up. And that might be with coffee or, a sugar hit first thing in the morning, a Coca-Cola or something to just, get themselves fired up. I don't need that. I just drink green tea. You don't need me in a learning environment with coffee. I'll be climbing the walls.
So that's a really sort of great lead into facilitation and getting up in front of a room. Was that something that came naturally to you, public speaking, presenting in public?
No, I was petrified of presenting in public. I physically used to throw up.
I think our listeners are really kind of, grateful that you've said that, because people that I talk to don't really have the confidence and think that it's something that they can't overcome. Obviously, you're one example of someone that's overcome it. What were the steps? Do you sort of remember? Was it quite a long time ago? How did you actually work your way up to becoming the facilitator you are today?
My father was very insistent that all of his children learnt to publicly speak. He felt that if you had the confidence to speak publicly, you'd have the confidence to do anything you want in life. It wasn't really about necessarily publicly speaking and the skills about it. It was about having the confidence, because if you look up what is people's biggest fear in the world, it's public speaking, next to spiders and heights, I believe. I did join the debating team, and I made a complete idiot of myself every single time I got up. That's if I got up. Most of the time I was down the girls' toilets heaving. And when I did get up, I would go into, fight, flight, freeze. I would freeze and make squeaking mouse noises. So every time I ever decided to join the debating team, there was always this huge sigh of, oh my goodness, she's doing it again. We've got no chance to get into the finals this year. So I left school knowing I will never publicly speak. It was absolutely physically impossible. Very soon after I got a job and was asked after a few months of working there that if I could do a presentation to the board, that I was to walk in, they would ask me some questions, I would answer them, and then hop out. And I just was really honest with my boss and said, look, I can't do that, and this is the reason why. And they made it really clear it wasn't negotiable. And Dad at the time was asking me, how's your job going? I said, I love it, but I'm leaving. And he said, why? And I said, they want me to talk, stand up and talk to board members. I said, we all know what's going to happen, so I'm best just to resign now. And he said, oh, well, if you're going to resign, you may as well give it a red-hot go. So I went in with my resignation in my back pocket thinking, I don't know, maybe I could throw it over the mess I might make. I did a lot of nodding and shaking my head trying to answer their questions with yes and no answers. And after a while, one of the board members just said, look, you're wasting our time. Do you want to leave? And I just shrugged. I was going to resign anyway. I gave it a shot and I walked out. And then one of the board members came up to me in the afternoon and said to me, you're scared of public speaking. And I said, petrified. And he said, I can help you with it. And I said, oh, it's okay, I'm resigning. And Dad kept saying to me, how long are you going to run from this? And I said, forever sounds good. Plenty of jobs around. I'm not worried. I'm really skilled. And he actually talked me out of resigning and took me under his wing. And over the following months, I got more and more confident. And it's something even to this day that if I do not get up and do public speaking at least once a month, I go through all the nerves all over again. So it's still there. It's about managing it. So when people talk to me about their fears of getting up in front of a group of people, I can relate very well. I'm very empathetic.
So what would be your advice to someone that is a first-time facilitator or wants to make that transition from subject matter expert to sharing their knowledge?
Yeah. The more you do it, the easier it gets. Everyone that first rides a bike will fall off. Every time anyone first gets up to publicly speak, they're going to make mistakes. And it's about motivation. It's about wanting to do it bad enough that you're going to put up with the trips and the stumbles and the scrapes and the bruises. And, there's lots of organisations around that you can do practice your public speaking. But if you really want to do it, you just need to practice just like when you rode a bike for the very first time. And public speaking is the same. You do it often enough, you can walk away from it, you come back, you might be a little bit wobbly, but you'll find your feet a lot faster. So practice makes perfect. I had plenty of people that I used to watch, either for my own professional development or watching someone before hiring them. So I know what made a good facilitator. Then taking all that on board is very different. But it's about making the list of what you think the big hitters are, the most important things, and just start working on them. And using every opportunity you get to publicly speak. So most people that don't like it, when they're offered to do it, they will run a mile. I know, I did it myself. So the idea of it is feeling motivated enough to get good at it, to throw yourself in. Every opportunity you get, jump on board. It's not something you can read about and go, okay, it'd be like reading a book on how to ride a bike and then thinking, after I've read the book, I can go and jump on the bike and I'm not going to fall off.
You just absolutely have this great presence when you're in a workshop and you look across participants and everyone's really listening in on your every word. If you had to pick one unique skill or superpower that you bring to the role of facilitator, what do you think that is for you?
Well, I'm going to actually ask you. You've watched me a few times facilitate, so can I ask you what
throw
you...
it back to me?
Yeah,
that's a good facilitation technique.
What do you think my superpower is?
I guess in my observation, especially as a client, so I'll come, Nikki's been running a session for a couple of hours and I'll just drop in at lunch or at the end of the day and I'll just say, oh, look, how's the course been going with your participants? And very quickly, she can go around the room and just talk to each participant and say, that person's not engaged at the moment, this person's a little bit quiet, I think these two sitting here is probably not a good idea. I'm going to split them up tomorrow. You really hone in and know exactly how each participant in that room is feeling, thinking, and probably their level of engagement in the workshop. But not only that, you've got solutions on how you're going to fix that and make it better for them, whether it's actually taking time to approach them and ask them questions. I think that's the most impressive thing I've found about your facilitation style, is that you just know what's going on in that room to an amazing level of detail. Yeah. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, it's my responsibility, isn't it, to ensure I have engagement. These people need to walk away with particular skills. And they're not going to, as I said before, they can't walk away with everything. But they should be walking away with 2 or 3 things that they feel comfortable enough to use back in the workplace tomorrow. So it would be very poor of me not to understand where my participants are going. And there's certain activities that I do first up to get a little bit more of an understanding of them and give them the opportunity to talk about what they want to talk about. There are certain icebreakers that I like using due to the fact that you get a little bit more of an understanding of why people are here, why they're in front of you, how much experience they have. And I find that by doing that one, it allows those that have got lots of experience to be able to say to everyone, I've been doing this for, 30-odd years leadership. And then you can praise them and go, well, that's great. It's good to have champions in the room and we can use your skills and knowledge to support others. And then also make it a very supportive environment that those that have come in and gone, I'm not even a leader yet. And those types of people are maybe being groomed by the organisation to be a leader, or they're people with influence.
So you mentioned a couple of icebreakers that you use to get them not to let down their guard, but to find out more information about them and reasons why they're in the room, levels of experience. Is there a particular icebreaker that's your go-to one to find that information out?
Probably I like to line them up in order of how long they've been a people leader for. Make it a little bit of fun. Can't open your mouth when you do it. Make sure that those hand signals are kept nice and clean also. And then from that, get them to then go down the line and introduce themselves. Who are you? What's your role around here? How long have you been doing people leadership? Then I get them to pair up with those that are least experienced, with those that have got more experience, and talk about what's their number one leadership challenge. And that's where we find out who came in with something on their mind and those that are just there, not sure even what they're there to learn. But, I think all senses are on high alert in that first 1 hour of a workshop as a facilitator.
Okay.
So you're really watching and observing and listening. Even when you're getting them to do an activity, you're listening to, who's being more dominant than somebody else in the activity, who's being supportive of each other in the activity, who's sitting there doing absolutely nothing and looking a little bit concerned, because at the end of the day we're going to have introverts and we're going to have extroverts, and we don't want the introverts walked all over. So in that first hour, I use a lot the DISC model, and I normally within the first hour will be able to work out who is where on the DISC model, and that also allows me then to know what's the best way of communicating with them and where their stretch places would be. So how far I can stretch them before they're going to feel a little bit uncomfortable, because we want a little bit of a stretch, but we certainly don't want to break anyone. We want them to be supported.
How do you manage then bringing in people that might be a bit more quiet or reserved? How do you bring them into the workshop and engaging?
So, with dominance, we normally find they're quite vocal. Not all the time, but quite often. And they want to share their experiences. They want to share their stories. So it's about allowing them the space to, but also making it at times drawing the line in the sand saying, I think you're working too hard. Jeff, I've heard from you for the last 4 times. I think you might want to have a break now. You're carrying the load for all these other people. Let's hear from someone that hasn't said anything yet. And it's about politely and respectfully, but also with a bit of fun. There's a little bit of tongue in cheek in being able to manage those personalities.
You spoke about earlier the skills of a facilitator, so preparing is really important for you. Making sure that you're using all your senses, so you're seeing what's going on, you're listening in to create a good group dynamic. Is there anything else that a facilitator really needs, like in their back pocket?
I was thinking about this on my drive-in this afternoon, and there are so many. And for every facilitator you ask that question to, it'll be something different. Now, I'm extremely high energy, so I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea. I can be quite overwhelming if you're if you're a real introvert, and it's working out who is who in your zoo. You then moderate yourself of what's appropriate for this learning environment. Yeah. So by being really prepared with your material, you then have the energy and the headspace while you're facilitating to change very quickly on a dime. Where if you haven't prepared and you are facilitating and things aren't going, the energy levels aren't right, or people are becoming argumentative, it's very hard for you to throw in other strategies because your head's so still in the content, and for you to think outside of that. Where if you've got the content in your head, you can be quite flexible and you can introduce different strategies all the time because you know your content well enough that it happens no matter what. You can then, in your head, while delivering the content, be thinking about other strategies and the things you've got to do. That was probably a really long-winded...
Oh, I love it. Long-winded's good.
But does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, because
absolutely.
if you were to get up and say the same thing, like for instance an induction, which a lot of people run. I don't, but I can imagine if you ran inductions, you would get to the point where you would be able to run that induction and your mind, you would actually be able to think about other things while doing it. And you will notice other things because you know the content so well, your head doesn't have to be all in the content. So you'll be noticing people, leaning forward or arms folded or looking out the window or, having a chat to the person next to it. You'll notice all of those things because you know your material so well.
Yeah. That brings me into an interesting story. So Nikki kindly asked me to co-facilitate a session last year, and it was part of a leadership course. And so I studied on this model. And I've been working at a TAFE for the last 6 years, and I walked into Nikki's workshop and I delivered this like I would at a TAFE session. And after the workshop, Nikki's like, "You're training them, Leanne, you're not facilitating." And I just didn't understand what she meant. I thought that was what I was meant to do. I was meant to train them and teach them in this model. And then you explained that training and facilitating were actually two different skill sets. Do you want to expand on that a bit more?
Yeah, so when you're training something, you can work out where they're at with that skill and knowledge, and then you fill the gap in a very quite structured manner. Okay. When you facilitate, there's more of an expectation of these people are coming in with a certain amount of experience and knowledge and skill already. They've already got a fair bit. And it's about really pulling what they've got already in their heads out. And so you will have someone that's got a lot of experience. You'll have someone in your learning environment with 20, 30 years experience as a leader, and then you'll have someone with none. So it's about managing the dynamics of the group for those people that have got the experience to be able to share it, and for giving those that have got no experience the opportunity to share how they would use that and how they feel about it and whether they could see themselves using it, and then filling the gaps.
All right, so we've spoken a lot about activities and energy levels. Let's talk about staging an activity. Do you go through a specific process when you do that?
I always find getting people into activities really interesting. In your head, you're thinking this is really simple, and in one foul swoop, you can actually cause absolute chaos in the learning environment. And it's one of those things that you hone the skill in how to start an activity. And I'll give you an example. I've been working recently with company people who are people leaders that have actually been chosen to co-facilitate with me on a leadership program. program. So we've put them through some facilitation skills, so to prepare them to be shoulder to shoulder with me in a learning environment, doing certain sections of the program. And interestingly, they always choose flip chart activities, and they joke and go, they look like the easiest, I'll do these. And it never ceases to amaze me how much chaos can be created in the manner in which they set the activity up. And I'll give you an example. When I get people to do a flip chart activity, I first off show them each of the flip charts. Everyone in the room, these are the flip charts. Then I say to them, in a moment, I'm going to get you to stand up in 4 groups, and I'm going to give you one of these flip charts each. I'm going to get you to work on it for 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and then after that I will rotate your group to the next flip chart. And it's amazing that with these co-facilitators, they'll start with the commencement of the activity with, we're going to do an activity and I'll get you all to stand up. And it never ceases to amaze me that when you get people to stand up, they automatically will start talking to the person next to them, wonder whether they're meant to take a pen with them, and they don't even know the activity, but chaos has already been created. So really simple things, which are one of those things where we trip and stumble a lot. We'll throw out an instruction and everyone will go, what did that mean? Or what did she say about this? Or, what are we meant to be doing next? And it'll create this chaos. And you've got to bring them all back to the centre of the room and then explain it again. And sometimes again.
So I guess the key here is, prevention's better than cure.
It is.
So, hey, we're going to do an activity. I'm going to explain it now. So try and prevent them from standing. Is that what you say?
I say that the moment they stand is the moment you will have them disengaged. They will suddenly need to go to the loo, get a cup of coffee, check their phone, on their way to their activity. So it's best while they're seated to give them as much information as you can, and then before they stand, let them know what's going to happen next. So that's why I say, in a moment, I'm going to get you to stand up and I'll get you to work in 4 groups. And each of the groups will be given a flip chart. And I'm letting them know where the journey's going. If you start the activity with, we're going to do an activity, I'll get you to stand up, the moment they stand up, it is so much more difficult to get them re-engaged in finishing what instructions you need to do.
How do you manage preparing with flying, again, keeping the energy levels, responding to emails, running your business on the road for most of the week? How do you do that?
You can't take yourself too seriously. And when you work and live on the road, you've got to have a sense of humour, because Murphy's Law is just sitting there on your shoulder, and you can have a whole week of what could ever go wrong. It does go wrong if you don't keep your sense of humour, I think, and if you take yourself too seriously, you could end up being a very stressed, cranky, angry person.
So how long has Corporate Learning Partners been operating?
About 13 years now.
Okay, and you mentioned that was the first time that you moved into a full-time facilitation role.
Yeah, so I went from managing training organisations and walked out the door and went into developing leadership programs, facilitating leadership programs.
So making that step from, full-time employment to running your own business is a huge step.
Massive.
You have no idea how it's going to go.
Massive.
Why did you make that step? What urged you to do that? Did you have any clients sort of on the books, or you just thought, I can do things and I can do them better?
I actually felt that it was my natural next step. And I'd been in the management area for a very long time. And for those that are people leaders out there, you will know what I mean by, you get to a point where you go, is this something that I want to continue doing? And I'd got to a point where I was at the level of general management by the time I left. And it was getting more and more paper orientated and less people orientated, and I like being around people, and I thought, why not give it a go? And it was a huge risk. I had no clients. I did have a very strong network of colleagues because I had for so many years worked with other facilitators who I'd hired as contractors to do work for me. So I had a wonderful network and an incredibly supportive network. There's a couple there that used to receive phone calls every night after I finished my my day, going, I think this is wrong, and what would you do about that? But that network was absolutely crucial.
Looking back at starting a business, would you do anything a bit differently?
As I mentioned before, you can't know everything when you take the leap of faith to do something. You've got to know a little bit about what you're doing. At the end of the day, I knew a lot about adult education, and I knew a lot about how to manage clients. I knew a lot about how people would come to the training when I was a manager and say, look, we think we need this and this is the reason why. I was already quite good at being able to interpret concerns and put them into practical ways of moving forward. So I took a lot to the table from my experience. But, registering businesses, organising GST, I had a mortgage, private school, so you're really juggling that, one moment I'm developing, the next moment I'm presenting, the next moment I'm invoicing, then I'm having to follow up, juggling all of it. And it's a huge learning curve. Yeah. So having a good accountant
Yes.
would be, believe it or not, right up there. And if I had to have a second one, it would be have a great network. Sometimes it's just nice to have a sounding board.
We'll definitely put those 2 recommendations in our show notes for this episode. Where can people find you?
So Corporate Learning Partners has a webpage, so www.corporatelearningpartners.com.au, and all the details, plus a little bit about what we do and the types of companies we work for and the type of work that we've done in the past.
Absolutely recommend Nikki and her team. They absolutely do a stellar job in delivering anything that you've got, and we always get great feedback from our participants. So, Nikki, thank you so much for coming on the First Time Facilitator podcast. I've definitely learnt an awful lot to up my facilitation game, and I've already had some great feedback from you over the last year and a half. So, thank you for that.
Thank you, Leanne, for the opportunity.
Anytime. Yeah. Thanks so much for tuning in to First Time Facilitator. If you liked the episode, please share it with your mates or subscribe to the podcast feed in iTunes. Till next time.